My name is Zandra Pinnix. I currently live in Wilmington, North Carolina. I am a faculty member at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington in the Department of Biology and Marine Biology. And it's the same department that I matriculated through when I received my undergraduate degree. So I'm back where I started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sandra, for joining me on the podcast. I'm really excited to hear how you were able to make this full circle kind of experience. And I also understand what it means to be able to work at one's alma mater, because so much of like my experience as well, and who I am and how I see the world was informed by my undergraduate years, and then you know like many years later, then I found myself working there, and it's just a very special feeling. And I'm so happy to hear that you are thriving in that space and paying it forward. And I'm sure it's been there's been a few or many twists and turns, and so we'll be getting into that and how again this topic of global citizenship comes into play in relation to the actions and your views on education. So yeah, thank you so much. And we'll begin with just kind of like, how did you arrive at this point where you could confidently say, I'm back where I started, but I'm different. Could you kind of share what were some of the major milestones that brought you to that point? And feel free to go back to, however far you'd like to really help us understand, like, yeah, who is Sandra and why is Sandra very passionate about, was it marine biology?
Well, it's the department is biology and marine biology.
Mhm.
I ended up attending undergrad here because I accepted a basketball scholarship, a full basketball scholarship. I'm originally from Georgia, a small town called Waycross, Georgia. And so after receiving the scholarship, I moved to North Carolina, to Wilmington. And and as I said, I played basketball and ended up graduating from the Department of Biology. It was just biology then, and minored in chemistry. But it was my professors. There were professors that were very involved in making sure that I was successful academically because a lot of my focus was on sports. Um, and so I just remembered, all that was instilled in me during my undergraduate academic career. And then also prior to, just being prepared to go to college, how educators from elementary, middle school, high school, and even my basketball coaches, from elementary, middle, and high school, they wanted to make sure that I had access. And they did things above and beyond what they were expected to do just to make sure of that. And so that's something that has been instilled in me, from an early age. So after graduating and going through getting other degrees or what have you, when presented with the opportunity to come back and pay it forward and instill some of those same values with my students, currently it was a no-brainer for me. It is surreal. It has been surreal being in this space and being able to teach my students, work with them on, independent study projects, research projects, just giving them what was given to me and then what I've acquired over the years to make sure that they also have access, giving them insight and knowledge and, how to break down barriers and how to overcome obstacles to make sure that they're in a space where they can be competitive to apply for graduate school and med school or dental school or what have you. It's such a privilege and an honor to be in this space to be able to help those in ways that I was helped, and above and beyond those ways as well. So yeah, it's a privilege for me.
Yeah, that sounds that sounds incredible. And you mentioned the word access a lot, how it's something that you were really, well, inspired by your teachers and your coaches, and that they really wanted you to have those opportunities. They wanted to show you multiple pathways, and they wanted to support you and tell you that you can choose, you can go this way if you want, and that to be able to pave that forward now. I mean, that's so beautiful, and I think more and more if we like regardless of our profession, what we do think about those early influences with this deeper sense of appreciation, like the way that you're speaking of it. I think, yeah, the our communities would be so much stronger for it, of course, right? Because then it always goes back to like, well, like they inspired me, but who and inspired them when they were my age, and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. Like, how far back are we going? Because it does come at a certain cost, maybe, right? I mean, it's their
Mhm.
time, it's their energy. You said they went be above and beyond. So I'm curious if you can think of like maybe a particular teacher or basketball coach who went above and beyond for you, like maybe kind of help us understand what was going on in that time period and why was it so pivotal for you?
Oh gosh, I mean, there were so many. I mean, in elementary school, right? I transferred to the school because I started living with my grandmother. And when I transferred to the school, they figured that I was supposed to be in fourth grade, but they put me in a fifth grade class. And so when I was in the fifth grade class, I was doing very well. And they ended up placing me in a gifted class. And so when they figured out the technicality, the principal came to my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Blondell Graham, and told her she's in the wrong grade. And Mrs. Graham says, she's the smartest kid in my class. You're not moving her anywhere. So, so I ended up staying in that fifth grade class, and flourishing. And during that year, I was walking by the basketball court, and at that time, everybody practiced outside because there wasn't a, indoor gym. And so I walked by and they were out there practicing. And um, the basketball coach, Mrs. Brenda Hall, she was out there, whatever. And so I went out there and she invited me in and I picked up the ball and just shot it. And it was just like, it was just innate, right? And so from that point, she made sure that, I had basketball shoes. She made sure that I, went to practices and games. She would make sure I had transportation. I'll never forget my first basketball game. I had on like a cheap pair of tennis shoes because that was all that my grandmother could afford. And they forgot to sweep the floor. So that game, I kept sliding, and every time I slid, the referees would call walk. And so after that game, the next game, we were preparing for the next game, and Mrs. Hall told me to come to her car, and I went to her car, and she had bought me a brand new pair of tennis shoes, Nike tennis shoes. I'll never forget, blue and white. And from that point on, I may have walked, but it wasn't because of the floor. But just gestures like that. I mean, middle school, I had awesome educators. My basketball coach, Mr. Mark Mooneyhan, he used to make sure that I, had transportation to and from practices. Um, High school, my basketball coach, it was just so many. My high school basketball coach, Coach Daryl Cruz, he used to pick me up from home for practice, take me to practice, bring me home, pick me up for games, take me back. Even when I went to college, he followed me. And I'll never forget my freshman year, we played Georgia Tech. He came to the game because it was in Georgia. And he went to the coaches and he told them, he said, you're playing her in the wrong position. And so they changed my position. And after they moved me to a different position, I began to flourish. So just, I mean, just so many, so many. And I'm just appreciative for all that was done for me and instilled in me, and the care and the concern, just going above and beyond. And all of that is still in me. And all of that is what I have to give to my students and those that I interact with.
Those are
You probably
beautiful.
didn't ask for all of that, but
Oh, no, no. I
and
asked
that's
just
just
to
a
get to know.
smidgen. That's just a smidgen. That's just the tip of the
I
iceberg, right?
know.
I mean, we
That's
could go on and
amazing,
on
though.
with that, but I
I
know.
think no, it's very valuable, very important, and because it does it reflects back on who you are today, and that's so important, right? And what you're trying to accomplish with the work that you do, and also just setting aside the work part of it, right? It's this the kind of like presence that you bring in the lives of your students, and the people around you, and this belief in them, right? To a point where like you can share recommendations, or you can make comments that are rooted in very careful and sincere observations, right? It's not
Mhm.
to say that you know everything about them, but clearly, the example of your high school coach to say, you're playing Sandra in the wrong position. Why don't you try her here? And then
Mhm.
things open up, right? Or
Yes.
your elementary school teacher is saying, oh, there was like a little bit of a glitch, and she actually should be in the fourth grade. No. And then she like positions herself and says, I know where she should be, playing on the court of academics, fifth grade.
Yes.
She's excelling in our gifted program. And yeah, and such kind gestures as well, that you mentioned, that I think are just really really wonderful, right? I think it's important to bring those stories up when so many other negative stories of kind of like the inhumanity or the distrust that it abounds, are all too prevalent, right? Um, so,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you grew up with your grandmother. So maybe one more, personal story, if that's okay. I'd love to hear a little bit more about maybe the role that your grandmother played in your life, and what were some maybe one or two key values that she really wanted to instill within you.
Yeah, grandma was she was awesome. I remember living with her when I was a child, when I was very young, because at that time my mom was actually touring. She was, singing backup for the group Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and she was traveling like to DC, and singing. And so I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. So she helped raise me, and one thing she always um, talked about was, showing love at home and then sharing it abroad. And that was something that she believed a lot in. She wanted to make sure that I understood that you love the people around you, but that love isn't just for the people around you. That love is for everybody. You start at home, but then when you interact with others, you share that same love that's being shown to you at home. Um, and so she always talked to me about, respecting others and respecting, especially the elderly. That was something that she really honed in on. She's like, if you see someone and they need help, you help them. And many times we would be, in the grocery store or, just in different places or whatever. And it was always the first response to jump in and to assist or to open the door or to, whatever was needed and whatever was necessary. And I think that that's something that has stuck with me all of my life. Um, I start with loving those people that are around me in my home, my husband, my dog, um, our parents, our siblings. But that love doesn't end there. That love continues to radiate to everyone that I interact with, and that's even internationally and globally. My husband and I, we have an outreach ministry, And so on Saturdays, we feed the homeless. We partner with other organizations in Africa and Haiti to build tiny houses for women that are displaced and educate children that are also at risk or that are being rehabilitated. So again, um, that my grandmother instilled of loving those that are around you and then allowing that love to radiate to everyone that you meet, everyone that you interact with.
Oh, I love that. The first value that you shared about like that your grandmother instilled within you, like showing love at home and sharing it abroad, is so simple yet profound. And yeah, and I think I would very much agree that the way that it's like framed as like within your local community, but then also extending that to those living much further away,
Mhm,
like
mhm.
in this outreach ministry that you said that you started with your husband, that there are no geographic boundaries where that love can reach.
That's right.
And yeah, and then also about really doing whatever you can to help others, and especially the elderly, because we are if you reach that age, it's actually quite good fortune, right? To be able to like continue to like share your stories and be
Yes.
a part of the lives of your family and your community. But oftentimes, right, in the kind of world that we live in, everything is go go go, and
Hmm.
we kind of seem to like forget about the elderly or think of them as that kind of like burden. And
Yes.
then it's like a dry well. It's like, where's the appreciation?
Right.
Where's the source? Like, yeah, it's important to recognize that. So your grandmother already sounds like she was an incredibly wise and compassionate person. So that's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes, she was. She was. And I think also another aspect of our ministry is ministering to the convalesced. So, we go into nursing homes
Mm.
and minister to the elderly there, and then people that are kind of at home and can't get out. And I guess I just got an aha moment. That's what drives that. And I never even thought about that until just now.
Well, that's why I'm doing this, right? This the space
Thank
to think about it, and
God.
it's really about connecting those dots because
Yeah.
you live this incredible life of yours to like be of service to others, to raise youth, to take care of the elderly. But oftentimes we get so fixated in just the kind of like actions of like doing it that we don't stop to think about what are the past influences that brought us to this point. And
Yeah.
yeah, and so you mentioned this outreach ministry a lot. And so it sounds that like, religious faith takes a big part of that. That sounds like a big part of who Sandra is. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What about your faith is so moving and driving of like the work that you do, not only with these various initiatives and projects that you mentioned about feeding the homeless, the building of tiny houses in Africa and Haiti for women at risk, and then also the kind of going into convalescent homes to support. Yeah, so like how are those initiatives affected? But then also how does that religious faith kind of, permeate all else with the work that you're doing in higher ed?
Well, and I have to go back to my grandmother and my mother, um, who allowed me to understand what faith and love is, and that faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That faith has given me the um, understanding of what true love really is and how to share that love. And so my faith, even from a young girl and and the faith has really allowed me to be able to stand in places where I probably thought I didn't belong or people didn't think I belonged. Um, because I knew who I was in my faith, it allowed me to be able to stand and say that I can do this. I can be this, regardless to what barriers are there or what other people think. Um, and so along my life's journey, it's been my faith that has propelled me to, seek opportunities, um, to even try when, chances have been very slim. And so my faith has allowed me um, to dart, or be in places where I probably didn't think that I could be. Even into, as far as attending undergrad, or even pursuing a bachelor's degree or going to college. Growing up, we didn't, have a lot as far as resources, as far as money. And so it was always, my mom was, encouraging me to enter into the military because she knew that I could go into the military and the military would pay for me, to go to college because that's what I wanted to do. And so she took me to the Air Force recruiter, and I sat there, and the recruiter was saying, "Well, I know you want to go to college, but your mom is saying that she can't afford to send you." And my thing was, I'm not going to the military. I'm going to college. And so my faith was so strong that I just believed that that was something that I was going to be able to do, and a door was going to be open for me to be able to do that. I didn't know how, and, didn't have the money, didn't have the resources. I didn't know anything about financial aid. My mom didn't know anything about financial aid. I was a first gen, would have been a first gen college student. I was a first gen high school graduate. So there was no prior knowledge as to what was required for me to go to college. The only thing that I had was my faith. And so I just stood and I just believed that it was going to happen. And when I was offered the basketball scholarship, I was like, oh God, thank you. That is my way. That is my ticket. And I took advantage of that. And I was afforded to be able to obtain that bachelor's degree. But yeah, it has truly, truly been my faith that has allowed me to be able to even knock on doors and watch them be opened unto me. And I, be able to walk through. And again, I had to knock on those doors, and those doors were opened. And my goal and my purpose in life, I feel like, is to make sure that those same doors that were open for me remain open for others, where they don't have to knock on them because they've already been knocked on. They've already been opened. And so now, because I've been given access, now I can show others those same doors that are already open for them to be able to walk through.
Well, I might also add that in addition to those doors that have been previously knocked upon, I'm sure that there will be other doors that just kind of no one even knew existed. And
Yes,
you, in your great wisdom and compassion, would be able to mentor and guide those students to undergo that process of really standing up in the same way that you did and believing that, yes, this door must and will open up
yes,
because that's the way the world works, right?
yes,
In the
yes.
realm of faith, you can't limit yourself to just, oh, this is gonna be just enough, like if only I could just reach this. But I think the power of faith, because I'm a practicing Buddhist.
Okay.
And the role of faith is no different from any other religion, I feel, in terms of how it anchors you and empowers you to really go beyond what you thought was possible. So it's just beautiful to hear that you really lived your life from a very young age with that strong sense of faith to go places and to experience what it's like to really not let someone tell you, no, you can't do that. And now you're at Harvard, which is amazing. So like you continue to like push open those new doors, which is amazing. And I love that you mentioned how important faith was, because I think that for me it resonates quite strongly.
Yes, yes, and I completely agree. And even in the mentoring piece, right? Like you said, that there are other doors, there are other um, there are other access pathways or places of accessibility that need to be exposed. And when I'm mentoring like my pre-health students, those students that want to apply to, med school or PA school, what have you, and I told them, I said, there are a lot of people that are going to apply, well, what's going to make you stand out? Everybody's going to drive the car with the four wheels, right? Because there are essentially four things that are required for admission. You got to have the scores, you got to have the GPA, you've got to do shadowing or um, you know um, volunteer work and what have you. But what's going to make your car stand out and be different from someone else's? And I share with them this show we used to watch called Pimp My Ride, where they would take the car and they would soup it up, and add the rims and all that stuff. I said, you know what? We need to pimp out your ride, because everybody's going to have that base vehicle, but what's going to make you stand out? And so from freshman year, let's work on pimping your ride. Let's work on making sure that your application, when it sits in front of those reviewers, they're going to look at your opening statement, right? Your essay. And that first line is just going to capture them to where they're going to want to read it. And they're going to know that this is something that you were purposed to do.
I love that. Pimp My Ride. I remember watching that show too, and just being amazed that like they put this in the car.
Right, right.
It was so extra, but I loved it. And
And the
and
journey, sometimes the journey makes that, right? What
yeah,
you go through and what you have to experience to get to the place that you are, it helps you to be able to stand out amongst others. So we can never negate the journey because the journey makes us who we are.
yeah. And like one of the things about that show, maybe I'm like reading too much into this, but within the span of like, I don't know, it's like what, 30-minute show, maybe
Uh-huh,
a bit
uh-huh.
less, but it takes you from like the need or the desire,
Mm-hmm.
and then they kind of put the car somewhere else, like in a shop, and they just like have at it, and then they bring it
Yeah,
out. The way that you're sharing about this process of preparing one's application is like they're the ones over, years putting in the effort, daily effort to make that the ride that they want. And so that
yes.
sense of it feels so like gratifying that like you made that and that that story. But like we always think like, oh, it's all like kind of like glamour and like, wow, it's so fancy at the end. But oftentimes to get there, like you have to ask yourself some difficult questions, or you have to make some difficult decisions along
Yeah.
the way. And I think that's a great a great metaphor. I haven't thought about it that way because I worked in admissions at my alma mater at Soka University of America,
Okay.
and it required a certain degree of mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
It was also, somewhat of a sales pitch too, of course, I'll be honest, right? We're trying to get them to come to our university. But at the same time, we want a genuine fit,
Mm-hmm.
and so we want them to like, we want to get to know them well enough to be able to mentor them in that degree. So I think your approach to mentorship and how it's so important to like make sure that you value your life beyond just like a base vehicle is so important.
Yes. 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 Absolutely.
So, yeah, I wanted to hear a little bit more about the work that you're doing within the university. Um, maybe, so you're working a lot with like pre-med students, and could you kind of share a little bit more about like maybe some of the different programs that you're involved with? Because I'm sure that it comes down to like one-on-one interactions with students, but also
Mhm.
you oversee a department. So what is that like for you?
So I absolutely love science. I'm actually a biochemist. And so I work with students, again, on independent projects. So I have like independent projects in the lab, and students sign up for them with me. And so during the course of the semester, we map out a plan as far as, experiments and, just meeting with them weekly to update me on their results and what have you. And so at the end, they have a final project or product, I should say. And so in that, I also serve as a pre-health coach. And so I have a group of advisees that plan to attend or pursue um, an MD degree, or they're going to apply to medical school or apply to dental school or PA school. And so I'm connected with them as freshmen. And so we map out a plan in conjunction with their regular academic advisor. We map out a plan for them, make sure that they have the available resources to be able to, get the hours that they need, the volunteer hours, the shadowing hours. I work with them on their personal essays. Um, I just mentor them, encourage them, and just make sure that they are on schedule with taking their MCATs or DAT or GRE if they're applying to PA school, what have you. Just making sure that they are aligned with the process and that um, you know they are in position to be competitive when they apply for professional school. And so that's my pre-health advising role. I also teach a couple of classes, biology classes, and I also serve as a faculty liaison for the men's golf team. And so that was an appointment by the chancellor. Um, and that also gives me a little bit of interaction with student athletes, especially with me being a former student athlete at the same institution. So the mentoring aspect of my position, I think it takes precedent over the courses that I teach, because I teach two classes. That's what maybe 7 hours during the week, but most of the other time that I spend on campus is actually in a mentoring role.
Wow. Yeah, your students are very lucky to have you as such a wise and grounded mentor. And
Appreciate that.
yeah, of course, I mean it. And I think the passion, your love for science really shows. And
And I have to attribute that again to a former teacher, right? So so in high school, I think it was my senior year, like up until my senior year, I always said, I want to be an attorney. I want to be an attorney. And so I took this anatomy and physiology class with Mr. Four, Howard Four. And it was like a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, what? We're doing dissections? Oh, this is so cool. Oh my gosh. No, I'm not going to be an attorney. I'm going to be a scientist. And so I even tell him now, because we're like friends on social media, and I always tell him it's your fault. But yeah, that's where my love for science came after taking his course. He just made it so interactive and so engaging. And that's something that I like to do with my students as well. It's not, when you come into my class, it's not a traditional lecture. I'm not going to sit there and read the brown cow made it with the black cow, my genetics class.
yeah.
It's not going to be that at all, right? It's going to be totally interactive and totally engaging. So, yeah.
So, the spark for you in that anatomy and physiology class was about the not just the fact that you got to like cut into some kind of like lab specimen. Maybe
Right.
there was some, novelty in that, of course, but the kind of like maybe energy, the excitement, the questions that came up throughout the class, and teachers have an
Mhm.
important role in that, definitely.
Yes.
Um, but when it comes to just science itself, like how does that like for you, how does that tie into like, I don't know, the bigger picture of like the what impact does your work or the knowledge of science do for the world? So I'm trying to think of this next kind of like
Mhm.
connection back to like global citizenship. In what ways like does this concept tie into being a biochemist, right? Or with the
Mhm.
classes that you teach, in biology. And how do you think that gets conveyed to your students? Is that a discussion that sometimes comes up? Is that perhaps like a what will you do with the
Mhm.
knowledge that you have accrued over these years?
Mhm.
Why do you want to be a doctor in the first place? I'm curious what kind of linkages could you make between those?
Well, one thing I can say in my genetics class, there's always the application to what's going on in the real world. And so, what does what you're learning, or how does it connect with what's going on in the real world? And so, we often discuss case studies, and these case studies are derived from different countries and situations, and we talk about the ethics that are involved, not just the science, right, but the ethics, and then the morals as well, and what does it mean to you, and what would you do if you were in that situation? We talk a lot about, do-it-yourself biology, and the ethics in that, and then also what restrictions do you think should be applied in different situations? And so it's more than just learning the science, right? It's important to learn the foundation, to learn, the content, but then what does it mean? It doesn't make sense to me to just teach students content and not give them an opportunity to use it while they're in your presence, right? And while you have their attention, because then it becomes relevant. It becomes relevant to them. And it makes them think that, hey, I can take this and use it. And it may be something that I can utilize to change something, in the world, whether it's, cloning or or if we're talking about hybridization or genetically modified foods or animals, right? What is it? What does it mean to me? And I always want to know, what does it mean to you, and how does it apply to you and the world around you?
I would love to just audit one of your classes just to hear you up there asking these really important and deep questions. Like I think the ethics part of it can always be or feel a little bit more, hmm, I don't know, like where is this all heading towards, like
Mhm.
students will always ask themselves like with this knowledge or should I push the boundaries in this, but then what's the point of it and how is it relevant? And I think simple questions like that, but that like how they actually get implemented into society can, like, once it's out there you can't really take it back out, like that's
Right,
seen in so much in like technological and scientific discoveries and advancements, um, that in the pursuit of just progress, right? We've forgotten to ask those questions, or
yeah.
we don't ask them in a serious enough way. So
Mhm.
that's, I think, really engaging to have as part of like your class, kind of like just ethos of like we're gonna ask these questions and we're gonna understand that like in addition to content, we want to know the deeper questions underpinning them. And yeah, and because science is so important, right? We whether we recognize it or not, like so much of all that is around us and how we understand the ways of the world function on certain principles within
Yeah.
science. So
It's
that's
essentially what the world eats and breathes, right?
yeah,
It's what
just that. That's it. Um, wow. Yeah. I'm like I'm getting inspired. Like I should brush up on, some more like science books and readings. So that might be coming up soon in the recommendations. Um, yeah,
Okay.
well, I did want to mention this is unrelated to science now. We're going to take a little bit of a turn
Okay.
to, you said that you were like a faculty liaison for the is it men's golf club?
Yes, men's golf team.
Oh
Yes.
yes, the team itself.
Yes.
And and so, I'm sure that like athletics is still an important, it's an interest of yours that there's still passion there.
Mhm.
So is it like, do you play golf or do you still pick up the basketball, like, lace on the shoes, like the Nike shoes and then shoot some hoops? Like, I'm just curious, like, what are some other interests that you have, in addition to like just the athletics part of it? Like, yeah, I'm just curious because I mean, you do so much with mentoring, and you have a family and you have you know your studies and a new master's program. You're busy, right? But what are some other interests?
So I still pick up the basketball every now and then, and sometimes I have challenges um, from younger people that I have to step up to the challenge and show them that I still have it. And so, but I have a newly acquired love for tennis. So I started playing tennis maybe about a year ago, and I don't know. I kind of like tennis more than I like basketball. So so that's something that I've started doing here lately, and it's something that I really love to do. But other than that, most of my time is really spent just ministering to others, ministering to our family, spending time with family. I love to cook, so I love trying new recipes. I'm thinking about doing something, as far as the using my chemistry background with cooking. I just hadn't come up with something kind of catchy yet, but so yeah, I love to cook, but most of my time is really spent really sharing love to others in many different ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know. I figured that you would have many different like interests and like other passions, since you're all about spreading love and you're like, oh, I love tennis, by the way. You inspire someone to pick up the racket and try it out. And if you like tennis, I hear that pickleball is like a big thing.
I love pickleball.
Yep.
I
See?
love pickleball. Yes.
I haven't tried it yet. My sister was encouraging me to go and play, but yeah, I have renewed determination to try that out now. Okay, wonderful. Well, I did want to ask though. This is kind of probably the final question, as we're kind of like starting to wrap things up here. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I feel like you've been able to share so much of kind of what makes you you, and then also how you operate on this feeling of like really wanting to share love with others. And I think that's an important message that more people need to hear. And so, in light of our conversation, I was wondering if you had any book or movie recommendations, anything that particularly inspires you or uplifts you, something that you think might be relevant in light of yeah, this notion of spreading love beyond, geographic boundaries, or understanding, yeah, what does it mean to really be there for another person or to like stand up on your own feet? I feel like all of these are really wonderful ways to like speak about how a global citizen can really, make their way through this very difficult world.
Well, I kind of have to give well, I have to give a plug in right now. It's not a book that I have read as of yet, but I anticipate and I'm so looking forward to reading this book. And the name of it is Leading with Heart and Soul, 30 Inspiring Lessons of Faith, Learning, and Leadership for Educators. And it's going to drop on April the 9th. It can be purchased through Amazon and you can pre-order it now. And it's written by none other than our very own Dr. Irvin Scott. And so I think that that book is going to speak a lot to my journey. and understand, his path and his journey as to what has inspired him and what will continue to inspire me and others who, really believe that faith and learning and leadership are intertwined. And that's something that I truly believe. I truly believe that my faith has and has supported and encouraged my learning as well as my leadership. And so that is a book that I would strongly encourage others to purchase. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading that.
I'm looking forward to reading that book as well. I have pre-ordered it
I
already,
have as well.
and
Yes,
I
I pre-ordered
appreciate the
mine.
plug. Yeah, Dr. Scott, if you're listening, shout out to you.
Yes, shout out to Dr. Scott.
And and I like how you mentioned, right? It's about the how faith, learning, and leadership are intertwined. I think it's powerful in like kind of laying those words out, you know, side by side, and
Mhm.
really, yeah, even just like the ordering of it too. I don't know. I'm just maybe I'm reading into it, but like it's
Yes,
always for me like
yes,
I'm learning, more and more, how that serves as the anchor
yes.
younger. I wasn't like you, Sandra. I feel like you were more enlightened and like kind of right from the get-go. But I had my own journey to like find we call it a self-motivated practice of the
Mm,
like habits and rituals and what have you, like
mhm,
carrying out being a Buddhist practitioner. But
mhm,
once I encountered that and really solidified that, there was so much more learning and opportunity that came from it. And then this feeling of like responsibility and being able to like pay it forward. And I think
mhm,
that informs one's leadership, in the best
mhm.
kind of way. Because we see other types of leadership that are not like that. It's not informed by
Mhm.
appreciation or love. And
Right,
you want
right.
to, speak out against that and dissuade that from, especially
Yeah.
from those whom we mentor in the classroom or just, at a convalescent home, right? Like anywhere, right? That we happen to, have our 2 feet planted. So I think that's really beautiful. And I just want to make yeah, I wanted to kind of highlight that. But, now I wanted to kind of, conclude things by really having you give the last few words, anything at all, Sandra, that you'd like to share as we, close out this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, I guess, I'm just very appreciative of, my family. My grandmother, my grandfather, my mom, who all instilled, faith and really allowed me to be in the position to understand what that meant, and allowed me to be grounded. And then, my family now, my husband, and I'm just very appreciative of my family and the support structure that I've had and that I have um, over the years and now. And I really want to be in a position to provide support to students, and especially first generation college students. My Upward Bound students. I volunteer with Upward Bound on Saturdays, and it's just a privilege and an honor to be able to give back a portion of what's been given to me. And again, I consider it an absolute privilege.